Ambassador Kim Mina stood in front of the mirror in her small cabin aboard the UES Harmony. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted the golden buttons on her ceremonial uniform. Today would change everything for humanity. After 50 years of watching alien ships pass through their solar system, Earth was finally ready to make contact with the vast galactic empire. The ship trembled as it dropped out of hyperspace. Through her small window, Mina could see the alien world of Kyrian Prime growing larger. The planet looked like a giant jewel floating in space, covered in crystal towers that caught the light of twin suns. "Ambassador, we have arrived," came the voice of Captain Lee Jun over the ship's communication system. "Please report to the observation deck." Mina walked through the narrow corridors of the Harmony. The ship was small compared to the massive alien vessels that had passed near Earth, but it was humanity's finest creation. 47 of Earth's best people were aboard. Scientists who had spent their lives studying alien technology, language experts who had learned to speak 17 different alien languages, and military advisors who understood the Empire's power. The observation deck was crowded when Mina arrived. Captain Lee Jun stood near the large windows, his face serious as he watched the alien ships approaching them. Dr. Park Hannah, their chief scientist, was taking readings with her equipment. "Look at that," Captain Lee said, pointing out the window. "The Empire sent hundreds of ships to meet us. Either they want to honor us or they want to make sure we cannot escape." Mina felt her stomach tighten. She had prepared for this moment for 10 years, studying every piece of information humanity had gathered about the Empire. But seeing the massive alien fleet made her realize how small and helpless Earth really was. "The ships are beautiful," Dr. Park said, her voice filled with wonder. "Their technology is at least 1,000 years ahead of ours. Those crystal spires on the planet must reach into space itself." The alien ships guided the Harmony down to the planet's surface. As they descended, Mina could see cities that stretched across entire continents. Billions of alien beings lived on this world, representing dozens of different species from across the galaxy. The landing ceremony was like nothing humanity had ever seen. The spaceport was made of the same crystal material as the towers, and it sparkled like diamonds in the sunlight. Thousands of alien beings had gathered to watch the humans arrive. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, others had 4 or 6 legs. Some had fur, others had scales, and a few seemed to be made of living metal. Emperor Zethrak of the Vorthan species waited for them in the center of the landing area. He was 3 meters tall with gray skin and 4 powerful arms. His eyes were like black holes, deep and cold. Around him stood officials from many different worlds, all wearing the symbols of the Galactic Empire. "Welcome humans from the world called Earth," Emperor Zethrak said. His voice was deep and rumbling like distant thunder. A small device around his neck translated his words into English. "You have traveled far to reach the center of civilized space." Mina stepped forward and bowed as she had practiced many times. "Your Imperial Majesty, I am Ambassador Kim Mina of Earth. We come in peace, hoping to join the community of intelligent species in the galaxy." She signaled to her team, and they brought forward the gifts humanity had prepared. There were paintings by Earth's greatest artists, recordings of beautiful music from every human culture, and data containing all of humanity's scientific knowledge. These gifts represented the best of what humans had created in their short history. Emperor Zethrak looked at the gifts with his cold black eyes. His 4 arms moved to touch some of the items, but his expression did not change. "Your species shows potential," he said finally. "The Empire may find uses for your world's resources. Your people seem industrious." The way he said the word "uses" made Mina feel cold inside. This was not the reaction she had hoped for. The Emperor was not talking about friendship or cooperation. He was talking about using humanity. The ceremony continued for several hours. Mina and her team were taken to a great palace made entirely of crystal. The rooms were beautiful but cold, and the alien servants who attended them never spoke unless asked direct questions. That evening, Mina met privately with several imperial officials. Trade Minister Velkith was a tall, thin creature with too many joints in his arms and legs. He spoke about trade agreements, but his words were frightening. "Your species will need to understand its appropriate position in the galactic order," he said, his voice like the sound of breaking glass. "New species always start at the bottom and work their way up through service to their betters." Defense Commander Kirin was even worse. He looked like a giant insect with razor-sharp claws and compound eyes that seemed to see everything. "Your world has untapped labor potential," he said, clicking his claws together. "Your people breed quickly and seem strong enough for industrial work. The Empire always needs workers for the mining worlds." Mina realized with growing horror that the Empire was not interested in humanity as partners. They saw humans as a resource to be exploited, no different from oil or metal to be dug from the ground. When she returned to her room that night, Mina sent an encrypted message back to Earth. Her hands were shaking as she typed the words that would change human history forever. Negotiations proceeding, but recommend increased defensive preparations. These beings view strength differently than we anticipated. They do not see us as equals. They see us as property. Ambassador Kim. Mina woke before dawn on the third day. She had barely slept, her mind filled with worry about the strange conversations from the previous evening. The Imperial officials had spoken about humanity in ways that made her skin crawl. They talked about humans like they were animals to be used for work. She dressed carefully in her best diplomatic uniform and checked her equipment one final time. The small communicator hidden in her sleeve could send messages back to Earth instantly. She hoped she would never need to use it for anything urgent. Captain Lee Jun knocked on her door at exactly 6 in the morning. His face was grim as he entered her room. "Something feels wrong about today," he said quietly. "My military training is telling me to be ready for trouble. The guards outside our rooms have changed. These new ones look more like soldiers than ceremonial guards." Dr. Park Hannah joined them in the corridor. She carried her scientific equipment in a small bag, still hoping to learn more about alien technology during their final day on the planet. "The energy readings in the palace have changed overnight," she whispered to them as they walked. "There are weapons powering up all around us. Big weapons." The three humans exchanged worried looks but continued walking toward the central hall. They had come too far to turn back now. 44 other members of their team were waiting for them, all dressed in their finest clothes for what was supposed to be a historic moment. The Imperial Palace's central hall was enormous. The ceiling reached so high that clouds could have formed inside it. The walls were made of the same crystal material as everything else on the planet, but today they seemed darker, more threatening. Emperor Zethrak stood at the far end of the hall, his four arms crossed over his massive chest. Around the edges of the room, hundreds of what Mina had thought were honor guards stood in perfect lines. But now she could see that their weapons were not ceremonial. They were real and deadly. In the center of the hall sat a table made of black crystal. On it lay the trade agreement that was supposed to bring peace between humanity and the Empire. The document looked very small and unimportant in the vast room. "Welcome, humans," Emperor Zethrak said as they approached. His translator device made his voice sound like grinding metal. "Today we will complete our business." Mina and her team arranged themselves around the table. She could feel the eyes of hundreds of alien beings watching them from the shadows. The feeling of being trapped grew stronger with each passing moment. "Before we proceed," Emperor Zethrak announced, raising one of his four hands, "the Empire must clarify certain misconceptions that your species seems to have about this meeting." Captain Lee Jun stepped forward, his hand moving unconsciously toward where his weapon would have been if the aliens had allowed him to carry one. "What misconceptions, Your Majesty?" he asked. "Your species approached us as equals," Zethrak continued, his black eyes fixed on the humans. "This was presumptuous and showed your ignorance of how the galaxy actually works. The Empire has already allocated your world's resources to member species who deserve them more than you do." The hall fell completely silent. Even the alien officials stopped their quiet conversations to listen. Dr. Park Hannah tried to activate her communicator to send a warning to Earth, but nothing happened. She pressed the emergency button again and again, but the device was dead. "The signals are being blocked," she whispered urgently to Mina. "We cannot contact home." "You are talking about conquest," Mina said, her voice steady despite the fear growing in her chest. "You never intended to make a peaceful agreement with us." "We prefer the word integration," Zethrak replied with what might have been a smile on his alien face. "Your peaceful overtures confirmed what our scouts reported about your species. Humanity is weak, divided, and completely unprepared for the realities of galactic politics." He gestured to the guards around the room, and Mina heard the sound of weapons powering up. The air began to smell of ozone and burning metal. "Your execution will be broadcast across the Empire," Zethrak announced calmly. "It will demonstrate to other primitive species the proper way to approach the Empire. You will serve as an example of what happens to those who presume to negotiate as equals." The massacre began without any warning. The guards who had been standing so still suddenly raised their weapons and opened fire. Beams of superheated plasma filled the air, turning the beautiful crystal hall into a killing field. Captain Lee Jun saw the first blast aimed at Ambassador Mina and threw himself between her and the weapon. The plasma beam burned through his body instantly, but his sacrifice gave Mina a few precious seconds. Dr. Park Hannah managed to activate her backup communicator and spoke 3 desperate words before the energy beams found her. They betrayed us. Ambassador Mina grabbed her own communicator as plasma fire erupted around her. With her last breath, she managed to send one final message to Earth. Earth, they never intended peace. Conquest fleets already? The transmission cut off as the plasma beam struck her. In less than 2 minutes, all 47 members of humanity's first diplomatic mission were dead. Their bodies lay smoking on the crystal floor of the palace that was supposed to have been the site of a historic peace agreement. Emperor Zethrak watched the massacre with satisfaction. He activated his own communication device and sent a message across the Empire's vast network. The execution was broadcast live to billions of alien beings on thousands of worlds, a clear message about what happened to species that dared to approach the Empire as equals. Admiral Jack's corvette of the Imperial Fleet received his orders within minutes of the massacre. He was to take the largest conquest fleet in the Empire's history and proceed immediately to the human homeworld. The planet called Earth would be enslaved before its people even learned that their diplomats were dead. The alarm bell screamed through the darkness at exactly 3:47 in the morning. President Choi Dae-sung jerked awake in his bed, his heart pounding as the emergency phone beside him rang with its harsh, urgent tone. He had been the leader of Earth for 8 years, but he had never heard this particular alarm before. It was the signal that meant humanity's worst fears had come true. "Mr. President," came the voice of his security chief. "You need to get to the command center immediately. We have received a transmission from deep space. It's about Ambassador Mina and the diplomatic mission." President Choi dressed quickly and was rushed through the empty streets of Seoul in an armored vehicle. The city was still asleep, unaware that everything was about to change. In 18 minutes, he was deep underground in the emergency command center that most people didn't even know existed. The command center was a vast room filled with computers and communication equipment. Giant screens covered the walls, and dozens of military officers worked at their stations. But today, everyone was gathered around the central screen, their faces pale with shock. "Show me," President Choi said simply. The screen flickered to life, showing the recording that had been transmitted across the galaxy by the alien empire. President Choi watched in growing horror as Emperor Zethrak announced the execution of the human diplomatic team. He saw Captain Lee Jun throw himself in front of Ambassador Mina. He heard Dr. Park Hannah's desperate final words. He watched as plasma fire filled the crystal hall and 47 brave humans died for the crime of asking for peace. The recording ended with Ambassador Mina's final transmission. "Earth, they never intended peace. Conquest fleets already." The command center was completely silent for a long moment. Then President Choi spoke, his voice as cold as winter ice. "How long until every human on Earth has seen this?" 15 minutes, sir," replied the communications officer. "The broadcast is going out on every channel, every network, every device capable of receiving signals." Across the planet, humans woke to the most terrible news in their species' history. In New York, families gathered around their televisions in disbelief. In Lagos, workers stopped their morning routines to watch the footage on their phones. In Mumbai, schoolchildren saw the massacre on classroom screens. In London, government officials rushed to emergency meetings. But there was no panic. No screaming in the streets. No riots or chaos. Instead, there was something much more dangerous. There was cold, calculated rage. Humanity had offered friendship and been answered with murder. The Empire had made a terrible mistake. General Yoon Kyung-hee stood before the assembled world leaders in the command center. She was a small woman with gray hair, but her eyes burned with fury. She had spent 30 years preparing for this day, hoping it would never come. "The Empire made a fundamental miscalculation," she announced to the room. "They looked at our peaceful diplomatic mission and mistook it for weakness. They saw our desire for friendship as a sign that we could not fight. They were wrong." Minister of Science Baek Jin-ho stepped forward and activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. The display showed the solar system, but not as most people knew it. Hidden installations revealed themselves on the hologram like flowers blooming in fast forward. "Operation Prometheus is ready for implementation," he said. "We have been preparing for this possibility for 50 years. The truth was revealed in that moment. Humanity's expansion into space had never been as peaceful as it appeared. Yes, humans had built research stations and mining facilities and colony worlds. But behind every civilian installation lay hidden military bases. Every asteroid that humans had claimed for mining had been hollowed out and filled with weapons. Every cargo ship that traveled between the worlds carried secret compartments filled with military equipment. The same species that had once fought terrible wars across their own planet had simply redirected that capacity toward threats from space. Humans had learned to hide their true nature behind smiles and diplomatic language, but they had never forgotten how to fight. Admiral Shin Woo-jin took command of the Solar Defense Fleet with a single order that echoed through hidden bases across the solar system. Prometheus is active. All units reveal and prepare for combat. What happened next would have shocked the alien empire if they had been able to see it. Massive shipyards that had been disguised as research stations began opening like metal flowers. Weapon platforms emerged from their hiding places inside asteroids, their guns charging with power that could crack moons. Cargo vessels throughout the system shed their false hulls like snakes shedding skin, revealing advanced warships underneath. On Mars, the civilian mining colonies suddenly sprouted missile launchers from underground silos. On Europa, the scientific research stations revealed themselves to be weapons manufacturing facilities that had been working at full capacity for decades. In the asteroid belt, what looked like simple mining operations were actually the largest weapons production centers in human history. The Empire had expected to find a single planet defended by primitive spacecraft and frightened civilians. Instead, they would find a species that had spent half a century preparing for war while pretending to prepare for peace. Humanity had learned a valuable lesson from their own bloody history. The best way to ensure peace was to be ready for war. President Choi addressed the human worlds with a message that was broadcast to every colony, every station, every ship in space. Ambassador Kim Mina and 46 brave souls went to make peace. They were murdered for their efforts. The Empire believes this makes us weak. They will learn otherwise. Admiral Shin Woo-jin's warships began moving into position throughout the solar system. The sleeping giant was awake and it was very, very angry. Admiral Jack's corvette stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, the Empire's Wrath, watching the stars shift as his fleet prepared to drop out of hyperspace. He commanded 300 of the Empire's finest warships, carrying enough firepower to destroy entire planets. This should be the easiest conquest in Imperial history. Prepare for system entry, he ordered his crew. Intelligence reports indicate primitive technology and minimal defenses. We should have this world enslaved within days. The alien officers on his bridge clicked and hissed their agreement. They had done this hundreds of times before. Primitive species were always the same. They panicked, they begged, they surrendered quickly when faced with Imperial might. The hyperspace tunnel collapsed around them as the fleet emerged into normal space near the third planet of the human solar system. Admiral Corvette expected to see a blue-green world protected by perhaps a few small spacecraft and some orbital stations. Instead, his ships materialized directly into hell. The attack began before the Imperial fleet had even finished dropping out of hyperspace. Weapon platforms that had been invisible moments before suddenly appeared throughout the solar system, their guns already charged and aimed. The first volley of fire came from weapons that shouldn't have existed according to Imperial intelligence reports. Shields up. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Admiral Corvette screamed as his flagship shook under the impact of particle beam weapons that were somehow more powerful than his own. The bridge erupted in chaos as damage reports flooded in from across the fleet. Ships that had been invincible for centuries were suddenly taking heavy damage from weapons that violated the established laws of galactic warfare. Impossible. Corvette snarled as his flagship's shields buckled under focused fire from multiple directions. Our intelligence reported no significant military presence in this system. Where are these weapons coming from? Commander Nell Vask, his second-in-command, frantically studied the tactical displays. Her insect-like eyes widened in disbelief as she watched the human attack unfold. "Sir, these aren't random attacks," she reported, her voice filled with growing panic. "The humans are targeting our command ships first, then systematically disabling our heavier units. They know exactly where to hit us for maximum damage." Admiral Corvette watched in horror as his perfect battle formation disintegrated under the precise human assault. Ships that had conquered 1,000 worlds were being destroyed by enemies they couldn't even see clearly. The humans were using tactics that seemed impossible. Their weapons fired from asteroids, from hidden platforms, from ships that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Then the real shock came. Admiral Shin Woo-jin's main fleet emerged from behind Earth's moon, their ships moving with a precision that unsettled even veteran Imperial officers. The human vessels were smaller than Imperial ships, but they moved like a single organism, each ship knowing exactly where every other ship would be at every moment. "How are they coordinating like that?" Commander Vask whispered. "No species fights with that level of precision." The human tactics proved brutally effective. They adapted their attacks in real time, learning from each exchange of fire and adjusting their strategy instantly. When the Imperial ships tried to form defensive formations, the humans split into smaller groups and attacked from multiple angles. When the Imperial fleet tried to retreat, the humans predicted their movements and cut off escape routes. Admiral Corvetha's flagship took a direct hit to its main engines. Emergency lights flashed red across the bridge as the great ship began to lose power. Around him, the greatest conquest fleet in Imperial history was being systematically destroyed by a species that was supposed to be primitive and helpless. "Sir, we're losing main power," reported the engineering officer. "The humans have somehow disabled our primary systems without destroying the ship completely." That was when Admiral Corveth realized the terrible truth. The humans weren't trying to destroy his fleet. They were trying to capture it. They wanted Imperial prisoners, Imperial technology, Imperial information. The Empire's wrath shuddered as human boarding pods attached to its hull. Admiral Corveth drew his plasma pistol, determined to fight to the end, but the human soldiers who entered his bridge moved with the same terrifying precision as their ships. They were armored from head to toe in black metal that seemed to absorb light itself. The battle for the flagship lasted only minutes. Admiral Corveth found himself a prisoner aboard his own ship, facing human interrogators who seemed to know more about Imperial military doctrine than some of his own officers. But the real shock came during his questioning. The humans didn't just want tactical information about his fleet. They demanded star charts showing the locations of every Imperial world. They wanted to know about supply lines, about fleet positions, about the defenses of the Imperial capital itself. "You're planning more than defense," Admiral Corveth realized during one particularly intense interrogation session. The human officer questioning him was a woman with cold eyes and perfect knowledge of Imperial weak points. "You don't just want to protect your world. You intend to follow us home." The human officer smiled, and Admiral Corveth felt fear like he had never experienced before. "Your empire murdered our diplomats," she said simply. "You sent fleets to enslave our people. Did you really think we would just defend ourselves and call it even?" Across the Imperial communication networks, a human voice began broadcasting on all channels. It was Admiral Shin Wujin, speaking from the bridge of his flagship. "This is Admiral Shin Wujin of the Human Defense Fleet. Your empire murdered 47 humans who came in peace. You sent armies to enslave our world. You made a mistake. We are coming for all of you." The surviving Imperial ships fled toward Empire space, carrying news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The humans were coming, and they were nothing like the primitive species the Empire had expected to find. The human war machine rolled across the galaxy like an unstoppable storm. Unlike the Empire's member species who fought for conquest or resources, humans fought with the focused intensity of a species seeking justice for their murdered friends. Every battle was fought with the memory of Ambassador Kim Mina and her 46 companions burning in their hearts. General Park Dongwook stood on the command deck of his assault ship as it approached Kelver Prime, one of the Empire's largest slave worlds. Through the viewports, he could see the massive prison cities that covered the planet's surface. 3 million beings from dozens of different species lived in chains below, working in factories and mines to feed the Empire's endless hunger for resources. "All units, begin the liberation assault," General Park commanded. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with determination. "Remember, we are here to free slaves, not to conquer. Every life we save today honors the memory of our fallen diplomats." The human fleet struck the planet's orbital defenses with surgical precision. Unlike the Empire's brutal tactics, the humans targeted only military installations while carefully avoiding civilian areas. Within 6 hours, the planet's defenses were destroyed and human troops were landing in the prison cities. The enslaved beings couldn't believe what they were seeing. For centuries, they had been told that the Empire was the strongest force in the galaxy, that resistance was impossible. Now human soldiers were cutting through their chains and telling them they were free. "We don't want to rule you," General Park told the liberated slaves through translators. "We want you to rule yourselves. Choose your own leaders, make your own laws, live as free beings should live." The news of Kelver Prime's liberation spread through the galaxy like wildfire. On 1,000 enslaved worlds, beings who had given up hope began to dream of freedom again. Admiral Seo Minjae led her fleet deep into Empire space to attack the massive shipyards at Zirion. These yards had built the Empire's war fleets for over 1,000 years, and their destruction would cripple the Empire's ability to build new ships. The battle at Zirion lasted 3 days. The Empire threw everything they had at the human fleet, but Admiral Seo's ships fought with a coordination that seemed impossible. Each human vessel moved as if it could read the minds of every other ship in the fleet. Target the construction facilities first, Admiral CO ordered as her ships swept through the system. Then the fuel depots, then the administrative centers. We want to shut down their ability to make war, not just win a single battle. When the smoke cleared, the greatest shipyards in Imperial history were nothing but floating debris. The Empire's ability to replace their losses had been cut in half with a single victory. Captain Nam Yuna specialized in capturing supply depots and logistics centers. Her forces moved through Empire space like phantoms, striking at the networks that kept Imperial fleets fed and fueled. Each captured depot revealed the locations of new targets, and each victory weakened the Empire's ability to maintain their vast military machine. Intelligence gathered from Depot 73, Captain Nam reported to the human command. We now have the locations of 18 more supply stations and the main Imperial fuel processing center at Corvanon. But what truly broke the Empire was not human military might. It was humanity's treatment of the species they liberated. Rather than creating their own empire to replace the old one, humans offered genuine freedom and mutual cooperation, the same thing Ambassador Kim Mina had originally offered to the Empire. World after world defected to join the growing human-led coalition. The Alt-Hari, who had been enslaved for 3 centuries, provided crucial intelligence about Imperial weak points. The Zephyrians shared their advanced sensor technology, allowing human ships to see farther and faster than ever before. The Corlan contributed their detailed knowledge of Imperial military tactics and strategies. We remember what it was like to be free, said Veltar, an Alt-Hari leader who had joined the human coalition. Your ambassador Kim Mina offered us something we thought was gone forever, the chance to be partners instead of slaves. We will fight beside you until every chain in the galaxy is broken. The coalition grew stronger with each victory. Species that had been enemies under Imperial rule learned to work together as equals in the human alliance. The galaxy had never seen anything like it, a military force that fought not for conquest but for liberation. The final battle came at Kyrian Prime itself, the crystal world where the nightmare had begun. Emperor Zethrak made his last stand in the same palace where he had ordered the massacre of the human diplomatic team. Admiral Shin Wujin personally led the assault on the Imperial Palace. His ships surrounded the crystal world while human and allied forces landed in the capital city. The population, seeing the massive human fleet, began surrendering without a fight. They had heard what happened to worlds that opposed the humans, they were liberated and given freedom. They had also heard what happened to Imperial officials who had participated in the slave trade. They were captured and put on trial for their crimes. Emperor Zethrak waited in his throne room as human soldiers fought their way through the palace corridors. His elite guards, the same ones who had murdered the human diplomats, fell one by one to human weapons and human justice. When Admiral Shin Wujin finally entered the throne room, Emperor Zethrak was alone. The four-armed tyrant sat on his crystal throne, his black eyes reflecting the lights of the burning city outside. "Spare me," the fallen emperor pleaded as human soldiers surrounded him. "I will give you control of the empire. You can rule as I ruled. Take my throne, take my power, take everything." Admiral Shin Wujin looked at the spot on the floor where Ambassador Kim Mina had died. Her blood had long since been cleaned away, but the memory remained as fresh as yesterday. "The empire ends today," Admiral Shin said quietly. "The age of empires ends today."